This week, we're talking to a ridiculously successful entrepreneur, Mark Organ. Mark is an entrepreneurial go-to-market specialist, a CEO with a focus on sales, marketing, and business development. Along the way, he's lived in Toronto, Silicon Valley, Chicago, and Singapore. He's founded 6 companies, raised more than 15 rounds of financing, hired over 250 people, built 7 offices around the world, and helped a lot of people realize their dreams. We had a bunch of questions for him, but he was so interesting that we just let him talk. It's another episode of Startup Different. This is the Startup Different podcast, hosted by successful entrepreneurs and brothers, Dave and Chris Sinkinson. We're here to bust startup myths and give you the insights you need to help you reach your startup dreams. Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Startup Different. I'm Dave. He's Chris, and today we have Mark.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. You're like an outrageously successful entrepreneur, so it's actually a little bit intimidating to talk to you. I'm not going to lie. I am super excited, though, to have you here because I think some of the folks that are going to be watching here today and listening today have a lot to learn, and specifically from you. And I'm really excited to talk about it.
All right. I'll try to be outrageous.
Yeah, no pressure. No pressure. Why don't we start by setting the table? So in the intro, we talked a little bit about your past experience, multiple continents, multiple businesses, all that kind of stuff. Can you give us the Coles notes on your career up to this point, like some of your journey? I think it would be really benefit our folks today.
Sure. Well, I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. So even as a kid, apparently I was selling medicine from my parents' medicine cabinet.
Oh, and that doesn't sound legal.
For sure, it wasn't legal.
Yeah.
And then so I graduated from being a drug dealer. To being a pornographer.
Oh, wait, context. No.
So I was like 13 years old and discovered my grandfather's videotape collection.
No, you didn't. Oh my God.
Made copies of those and then started.
You made copies?
Copies and sold copies. That was back when,
that must have been a booming business.
It was, until it got shut down in the schoolyard and whatever. But yeah, so I've always been.
I've never heard that. That's a pretty good intro story. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've subsequently built a little bit more respectable businesses. But my dad is an entrepreneur, sort of a classic sort of buy low, sell high kind of entrepreneur. Okay. He was a pharmacist and had a number of little businesses that he'd built on the side. So I came from an entrepreneurial family, although ironically, both of my parents and my mom actually became an entrepreneur too. Later in life, she opened up a cooking school.
Cool.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I came out of that lifestyle, but ironically, both of my parents really did not want me to be an entrepreneur. And I think it's because they associated it with having a hard life. And if you think about non-disruptive technology entrepreneurship, think about you're running a restaurant.
Yeah, I was going to say a
something
restaurant
like that, or a services business, or
barbershop, or whatever.
Or even if you have a manufacturing business.
Sure.
Like one of my dad's businesses was a distribution company. He had a warehouse for pharmaceutical distribution. Razor thin margins, less than 2% margins.
Wow.
Right? So even in a bigger business, and he had all kinds of, he had people stealing from him, he had all kinds of problems.
All the same issues. Yeah, for sure.
And so they said, this is not a good life. You should go be a doctor or a lawyer or, something like that. Professor, they wanted me to, so I was really interested in neuroscience. We were talking about some of my adventures in neural net programming in the 90s.
Cool.
They were very excited about me becoming a professor. Not really realizing, especially with disruptive technology, that the equation around the risk-reward equation around entrepreneurship really can tilt much more heavily towards the reward.
Right.
And that's what I got excited about. I was actually in my PhD in neuroscience at Northwestern, so I did end up going that route.
Oh, nice.
And that's, so Netscape just came on the scene.
Nice.
And I started, for the first time, we were seeing these companies that were scaling like crazy. And wow, was that ever exciting for me to see a different kind of entrepreneurship that you really could change the world, where you could get, millions of users potentially.
Yeah.
And so I got really excited about that. I ended up quitting my PhD.
Oh, I'm sure they were thrilled about that. Eh?
They probably were thrilled about that, honestly. I have all kinds of hilarious stories I could tell you about my adventures in neuroscience there, but I didn't go right away. I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur again, as I was in university, where I was painting houses in university.
Okay.
I had custom software that I was developing out of high school. So
wow.
I did remember those being great experiences for me. But I also realized that with disruptive innovation comes a requirement to be a better manager and leader. And so I had a sense that I was very rough around the edges. And so I applied to work at management consultancies. And so I was at Northwestern at the time, and there were some people at the Kellogg School of Business that
great school.
Yeah, it's great. And it was one of the things that they did, which was great, is that they were very interested in people who were doing the hard sciences, in engineering and hard sciences. And we're giving free advice, career advice. And that's one of the things they said is, you should be a management consultant. I'm like, what's that?
Yeah, never heard of it.
And so learned about that. And that seemed really cool. And by some miracle, Bain and Company hired me.
Amazing.
And I was able to go back to Toronto and be with my then girlfriend and subsequently pay my wife.
Yeah.
And so I became a management consultant at Bain. I learned a ton. I really learned, because I never got my MBA. I mean, essentially, that was like my MBA. I learned all these incredible tools for how to analyze a business and how to fix it. But within 18 months, I had started a company called Eloqua out of the Bain office.
Oh, hang on. How did you have time to do that? That's crazy. Because the consultant lifestyle, from what I understand, is totally absurd. Our other brother, brother Mike, he actually now a professor at Kellogg, oddly enough, but he was at McKinsey, and it just ate his life, being a consultant there.
Well, it was a crazy time. So this was 1999. This was the height of the dot-com boom. Bain lost 2/3 of their entire staff that year in California startups.
Wow.
They were seriously at risk of having the business implode.
Wow.
Because so many people were out there, getting into the technology business. And so they let me go half time. So at the time we had, you worked on 2 cases at a time. And so I had one case, and then the other case was my startup.
Okay, cool.
And at the time, I didn't really know exactly what it is that I wanted to build. I was excited about something, and me and my co-founder was also at Bain at the time, like you guys. He was my housemate at Queens.
Oh, nice, sweet.
And so he was an Eng Phys guy. No programming experience at university, but of course, they're not hiring a lot of engineers out there. Engineering, really, you need code in order to do your job. So he worked at Celestica and built one of the first cloud-based systems for controlling factories over in China.
Wait, in 1999?
Yeah.
Wow. Whoa,
really?
That's way ahead of
and
schedule.
Super lucky for me, because we ended up building one of the first cloud-based systems ever a few months after Salesforce.com.
Oh, cool. Wow, that's pretty awesome.
It was pretty early.
Very impressive.
So it's just very lucky that, we were in the same house together. I actually helped him get that job at Bain. So we had these really interesting experiences. In my case, I had a case where I was doing sales effectiveness. So we were looking at the effectiveness of sales teams at an insurance and financial planning company. And one of the things that we realized is that, first, sales capacity is incredibly valuable, number one. Secondly, the sales reps that were sticking around were breaking all the rules of this company.
Okay.
And which is interesting.
It kind of sounds about right, but okay.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like they were using SDRs for setting appointments.
Okay.
And they were also using the internet more, using email and looking at website activity and whatnot. So I knew it's like if we can leverage the internet to help sales reps make more sales, there's probably a business there somewhere.
Yes,
that's all we knew. And my co-founder Steve, he was trying to do a bunch of Christmas shopping online back then, and what he found was that he really couldn't do that very well without advice and service. So we put our experiences together, and it's like, let's build software that connects buyers and sellers over the internet.
Yeah,
That was our
revolutionary.
That was our
right?
idea.
Yeah.
That was
So
it.
amazing.
And we literally did that. So
Yeah.
we built something that today you would see as like an intercom or live person or whatever. It's like a live chat
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
Things haven't changed that much
No.
in 24 years.
That's crazy. Yeah.
That was our first thing. And when we had our first first order, then we quit the company. And it turns out that the person who made that order subsequently decided not to pay us. But we were
That
then,
doesn't matter. Don't worry about that.
we were then doing it. And then our first real customer was today would be called Cushman and Wakefield, but this is Royal LePage commercial.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the only reason why they took a meeting with me was because they were finding us office space. And so I literally walked in. So this is crazy.
Two-way sale going on there.
Yeah, and I mean, someone told me once, Mark, your greatest strength is your naivete.
Yeah.
It was so true. I walked into this guy's office, the CEO of Royal LePage. His office is bigger than my house.
Yeah. Nice.
And I had handmade business cards.
Ooh.
I had a product that I don't even think it was alpha. It was mainly a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I would never do that today.
Yeah.
No,
But
scary,
you know
right?
what? I didn't know what I didn't know, and that was
Yeah.
great. And I ended up walking out with my first order for
Amazing.
$3,000 a month, and that
Wow.
became my first customer. And because it was B2B, whereas at the time our competitors, which were at the time they were doing chat, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was where we started. They were all consumer focused.
Sure.
Our first customer was B2B, and that was also lucky because it took us in a completely different direction as everyone else in the space.
Cool.
Right.
And if there's one thing that I think is super important that you're building a company is do things differently.
Yeah, for sure.
Even for the sake of doing it differently, I would do it differently.
Would you say you started up differently?
Yes.
Yes.
You know, that was
Thank
not,
God we worked that into the
even
show.
though it's not, but that was some inception.
Yeah. Just because you kept reading it over and over, it just made its way into your brain. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's something I mean, if there's one thing I believe passionately in, it's differentiation.
Yeah.
And even in my next company after Eloqua, I just had a concept I just called the X Factor. And everyone knew who worked for me, don't present a proposal to me to do anything unless there was something really special. Even if it's like, we have a new program for how we're going to serve lunch to our employees. Like, what's the X factor? How are we doing this special and different from everyone else? I think it's the sum of all the differentiators we have that actually allow us to build something special. And you never know what that one thing is.
Yeah.
I think it's really valuable to hardwire that in your company.
Totally.
And the most important, I think, differentiation, innovation happens around, not in the product. It's everything else. It's how we price. It's how we package. It's how we hire. There's opportunity to innovate and do things differently everywhere in a company.
Hey, we're taking a short break to tell you some exciting news. Chris and I wrote a book. Surprise! It's called Startup Different, the myth-busting blueprint for your multi-million-dollar business, and it's available now. Like our show, we're trying to pay it forward to our fellow entrepreneurs. The book busts 33 business myths, tells some of our most hilarious stories, and gives you many of our best tools to build, scale, and exit your business. You'll find the book on all major online retailers, including Amazon. Check it out. We think it's pretty great. And now, back to the show.
I think that's interesting because we always used to talk, like one of our favorite go-to business books is Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And we would always talk about, like, how do we iteratively improve this? How do we, and I'm going to shout this over to you, but how do we elevate whatever it is we were doing? And so we would look for opportunities to do that everywhere in our business. And it would manifest in a culture, like a company culture, that was about how do we go further for people or for our team or for whatever. And I think it was a huge differentiator in at least our success. And I'm hearing the same from you.
I love it. Yeah. So I started as a scientist.
Right.
And then in management consulting is actually very much uses a scientific method as well. They don't call it that. They call it 80-20, work planning. They call it something else. Doctors call it differential diagnosis. It's the same thing. It's, you have a hypothesis, you list out your assumptions, and then you iteratively learn.
Yeah.
And then, you then quickly, if you do it right, you quickly get to the right place. And so I'm a big fan of that approach to things. And so if you've got that hardwired in your company, it's like, let's just start somewhere. Let's take an educated guess and build an iterative program around it so that we learn fast. Because I think it really is often the startup that learns the fastest that ends up winning.
That's really interesting. I think that's probably true. What's your
It
take?
sounds very familiar. Like,
Yeah, it does. It feels pretty natural, to be honest, because I feel like how quickly you iterate, like just thinking broadly about smaller companies, one of their strongest advantages against the big guys is always we can just go to market faster, we can iterate faster, we can test faster. Big companies are going to have more bureaucratic. Not that big companies are terrible or something, but it just takes them longer. There's more bureaucracy. There's more of a process in there. And I think the challenge for as companies scale and grow and get larger is how do we continue to operate in that sort of like nimble way in the market?
Agreed. Yeah.
Right.
No, and some companies have done well. We mentioned Salesforce.com.
Yeah.
I think that is a great example of a large company that keeps itself young, and they do that by when they acquire companies, they really are highly focused on the founders.
Okay.
And they like to hire good founders and retain them.
I'm sure.
And so I know a number of, at least a dozen founders that they've acquired, and they stick around. So usually founders leave.
Yep.
Within
I mean,
a year.
case in point. Like,
I mean, they can't handle it. At Salesforce, they stick around for 3 years.
that's interesting.
Often.
Like because they want to, or
Yeah,
because they're being
because they want to.
Okay,
Because because Mark treasures these people. He has a lot of reverence for founders, and he gives them projects that are really exciting to run. In many cases, they're not running their company anymore.
Oh, okay.
They have someone else who will come in. The founders actually go to do something more entrepreneurial in the company oftentimes.
But how do founders, because you, of course, being a multiple founder, having multiple successful businesses, how do you, if you were working, let's say you were working for Salesforce and they're saying to you, hey, we want you to like build this great company, do some like entrepreneurship inside of Salesforce and build this out. Wouldn't you be thinking to yourself, well, maybe I could, like Salesforce has tremendous resources, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, no, and I think the compensation is often pretty good.
Okay.
Too.
Okay. So I guess, it does come down to the dollars and cents of it. Too, right?
That, but also, it's pretty exciting when you have those kind of resources available. Like it's pretty exciting that it's wow, if I build this thing, I can put it through a Salesforce of thousands of reps.
Yeah, true.
And massive marketing budgets, and I can be on stage at Dreamforce, which is happening tomorrow. I could be on stage at Dreamforce, and what does that do for my personal brand to be able to be there talking about my product? Like, I'd be pretty excited about that.
That's true. Yeah. That's a good one. By the way, this podcast is brought to you by Salesforce. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Actually, I find that really interesting because when we were leaving, we were obviously part of Motorola by the end of a long journey, but we didn't really feel that. We didn't really feel like we were kind of like, well, they're probably leaving anyway, and just let them go kind of thing. We didn't have any overtures to do anything like that, and I would have jumped at that.
I think,
to be quite honest with you.
And by the way, Motorola Solutions is a fantastic company, but I think that when we got there, it wasn't really clear what they wanted to do with us. We don't really fit the archetype of normal employees in a company.
Right. Yeah.
And they're kind of like, well, we're going to give you something. We're like, well, what? Yeah. And it was like, we don't know.
And they're kind of looking at the org chart going, where do we plug them in?
And so I think it's interesting because I also think that companies, and Motorola Solutions has actually done quite a bit of acquisition work, but I don't think it really compares to Salesforce. I think Salesforce is one of the bigger buyers.
I think they're an excellent acquirer.
They know how to do it.
There's a few that are just legendary. Cisco is another legendary acquirer.
Yeah.
They're just really, really good at it. They've got a playbook, and they keep the people around. And those people are really valuable, and they whack a lot of bureaucracy. And some of these companies like LinkedIn, for example, they acquired this tiny little company called Card Munch that had 8 employees. It's a very simple product. You scan the business card, it uploads stuff.
Cool.
So at the time, LinkedIn had a pretty cruddy mobile experience. Card Munch was a 100% mobile company. The founders came in there and were appalled by what they saw at LinkedIn and went to Reid Hoffman and said, these guys all have to go. They do not get mobile at all.
Right.
And so Reid made those guys in charge of mobile at LinkedIn.
Wow.
And within 6 months, their mobile experience rocked. It was great.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's some guts, though. You got to come into the company, though, too, and be like, by the way, all these people are terrible. Like, that would be a gutsy thing.
Or just that the culture's off. Like, these guys don't really get mobile. So I was actually pretty inspired by that same experience. So when I was running Influitive and I hired a whole bunch of enterprise software guys because I'm an enterprise software guy. So I hired a bunch of developers with enterprise software experience. And then, as you might guess, I had an enterprise software product that, looked like a lot of other enterprise software products, which has its strengths and weaknesses. But, what I found was that when we made our software more sort of consumery, it was getting more adoption. And so did something pretty rad. I happened to be on the board of a social gaming company that was kind of imploding because Facebook changed its algorithm.
Oh, God.
And
that's so crummy. But anyway.
So these guys were going to scatter to the four corners of the earth. And somehow I managed to convince these guys, which were in Singapore and Pakistan, to come to Toronto. And basically, I brought them into my company. And so there are all these gaming people.
Cool.
And it was pretty awesome. Like they came in, they were appalled.
Yeah.
They're like, why does it take a week to do anything around here? We would have this done before lunch.
Yeah.
So they made everything way faster,
Very cool.
much more iteration. And really it probably saved my company because we produced such a more exciting user experience that was like what you'd find in gaming. We didn't have to train users as much because these guys came in and said, no, you can't train anybody. Like training, we don't train anybody in gaming.
I love that.
Right.
I love that take because that is such a thing in like the big enterprise software. Okay, we're going to build it like this. And then of course we got to spend a bunch of time training and whatever. It's like, no, like the user should be able to figure it out on the first time through or pretty close anyway,
Yeah, first time through. And like gaming companies have all these really interesting models about how they make things harder at the right rate.
Yeah.
If you make it too hard too quickly, people bail. If you don't do it fast enough, then people are bored. So all of these ideas that are completely alien to the business software thing, they built that into the product.
Yeah.
And so we ended up creating, honestly, at the time, it was the weirdest enterprise software product you'd ever seen, but it really took off.
That's amazing.
And the more gamey we made it, the more popular it was and successful
That
it was.
is so cool. Yeah. That must be wild to you.
Yeah, absolutely. These were the things I was saying, and nobody was.
Well,
actually, our team was really.
Organizations get stuck in a way of doing things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's cool is that you have to have the vision to bring those kinds of groups together. You know what I mean? Like that's a gutsy thing to do. That could have not worked out, right? And then you've got a bunch of people who like to make games who are pissed off, and a bunch of people who like to make enterprise software who are pissed off. But the net result obviously worked.
Oh yeah, I've had lots of experiments that also completely failed.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about those.
But I think that part of the value of having an iterative and experimental approach is that you fail fast, right? So. One of the things that I learned when I was at Bain was that you always have to have a hypothesis, and it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. And I think that's really important, right? A lot of people, they might get attached to their hypothesis. The hypothesis is just a tool to get you to the answer faster.
Right.
That's all it is. So it's okay if you're wrong. You just need to know why you're wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you hire a bunch of gamers and things are blowing up in the wrong way. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
What's going on?
Wrong. People, what's really going on behind the scenes that is making it fail?
Cool.
And what do we learn from that? And so, I think that kind of very rapid, high tempo, experimental approach. Like I'm a fan of daily meetings. I have a daily all hands meeting at my last company.
How big was this company?
Even at 165 people, it was
Everybody
a daily
there.
all hands meeting. It was 9 minutes long.
Yeah.
That's
not
impressive in
not
and of
10,
itself. Yeah,
not
yeah.
10, not 8, 9 minutes.
Yeah.
At 11:51 Eastern. And the reason why I did it every day is I learned the value of tempo. I learned the value of having like a high tempo of learning.
Yeah.
Is how companies win.
Yeah.
Even some of the giants of our time, like I remember again back in the 90s, like Microsoft crushing every competitor that came its way, except for one, which was Intuit, which was Quicken. It's the only company they couldn't kill. But everyone else, they crushed. And they crushed it with a iterative approach to things. So I saw the power and the value of that.
I like the regular touch point. You want to talk about the...
Yeah. So we did everything Scrum, and we had the Scrum stand-up meeting, but we did it company-wide every morning, 9 o'clock. Okay. So we would have it actually in our office, right where the kitchen was. So staff would open the door. We'd be right there. So if anybody showed up at 9:01, the whole team was standing there, turning their heads simultaneously to see you walk in late.
But it was like, what did you do
the
yesterday?
company.
And what are you working on today? And do you need help, or what are you stuck on? And sometimes it kind of morphed into sort of highlights. But as the team got bigger,
you can't do it that way anymore.
like exactly. Well, we used to actually, we had all these like incremental improvements to it, where we actually had a little like egg timer. And you had like 15 to 30 seconds basically to talk about
so to go real quick.
Yeah.
So and then, it got bigger and you had to split it up into teams. But I love the idea of like,
once we hit like 25, 30 people, we stopped doing that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what did you do yesterday? What do you do tomorrow? And then it was more around, there was a departmental spotlight every day.
Cool.
So
basically.
So the purpose of the all hands meeting was so that everyone was able to learn what was going on in the company.
Yeah.
And so that we're a more cohesive group, because once you get bigger, now you have a marketing department, a sales, an engineering, whatever. They're not always talking to each other.
Yeah.
So, a sales guy says, this is what I pitched and it worked. Engineer says, this feature, I think you guys aren't talking about it enough. We should go and do that. So people are sharing insights and that. So I think as the company goes, you really can't over communicate enough. You just need more and more and more and more communication. And so the all hands meeting is sort of one way to do that. Weekly bulletin, I did that, like a weekly newsletter in the company. You really can't have enough of those.
Yeah.
Because what it allows you to do is it allows you to operate faster and have more trust in the company. As people understand each other and empathize with each other, you can move faster when there's trust. That's one of the things that big companies don't have. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
I remember I have a good friend of mine that has spent his career working in credit card companies. And he's like, I spend 4 out of 5 days watching my back.
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah.
for
I
sure.
don't know where the knife's, I know the knife's out there. I just
Yeah.
don't know where,
Who's
what
holding
direction
it?
who's holding it. What
Sort of
direction it's gonna come
Damocles
into.
just dangling above your head, right? Yeah. Like, I think that's really fascinating. But I felt that too working at big companies. You're going to get ambushed. You're just not sure by who. Who's going to be this week?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah.
Yeah. So I think for anyone watching, this is probably one of the best reasons to be in a startup is you get to choose your culture. You get to choose the people that are, around you. I mean, you can even choose your customers, right? The customers that inspire you every day. It's what I love about building a startup.
Yeah. So, we had other stuff we were going to talk about, but this got way more interesting. So I'm really glad that we did this. I think just being cognizant of time, I want to ask you just a simple question. And rather than me giving you something, I really would love your take. But if you could think of sort of like one startup myth, one thing that surprised you, or something that you could pass on. Like you've actually given people like 1,000 nuggets here in 20 odd minutes, and it's been awesome. I feel like I could talk to you for like 6 hours. But what is like one sort of myth that you think is really pervasive out there that a lot of founders who are watching today would benefit the most from?
So many, but probably one that pops to mind, especially if our audience is really more earlier stage, is that you need a killer idea to start a company.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many people that are waiting for their killer idea. And then maybe even worse, they come up with idea that's not quite killer. And they really fall in love with a kind of a product, idea. And I don't think it's a great way to build a company. I mean, what I think is important is to you fall in love with a problem that you're really, really passionate, about solving. So in the case of Eloqua, like when I was at Bain and I was interviewing these salespeople who were really struggling with marriages that were falling apart and all kinds of, because they were cold calling.
Yeah,
out of
their
the
life
white
was
pages,
falling
right?
apart and they're just feeling like
And it was
crap.
hard.
And yeah, for
It
sure.
was hard, and like I really felt it viscerally, and I knew, you know what, I want to solve this problem. I feel for these people, and I really believe that if they use the power of the internet, they can have a better life.
Yeah.
And so, it really made an impression on me. And my second company at Influitive, it was, all about how to get your customers to sell and market for you, better than your employees. And so when I started the company, I actually didn't know what I was going to build. I did know that referrals are really valuable and reference calls are valuable and reviews online were valuable for sure. But I just went out and said, this is what I'm passionate about, right? I think that customers, when they're motivated and are organized, can be really effective. Who else vibes to that?
Yeah.
And I got all these people said, I want to talk to you about that. I think
Very
that
cool.
sounds really interesting. And that's kind of when I started to put together the idea for the product, which failed. It was the wrong product, but it doesn't,
Right.
it does, the thing is, it's just a hypothesis. Your first product is just a hypothesis.
Yeah.
And some of it is right and some of it isn't right. And I think if you do it properly, you're like, you know what? This part of the product actually did the job. This one didn't. These types of customers seem to get it more than these ones. And I think you can iterate your way to the right product, which will be a killer idea.
Yeah.
I think if you've really done the work, which, I'm a proponent of that as a CEO or founder. I mean, to have as much surface area with the market as you can.
For sure. Absolutely.
To get out there and to really validate or invalidate your ideas. It really doesn't take long. Like maybe I don't think it's long, but maybe within 18 months.
Yeah, I was going to say
a
little bit over a year, maybe.
Yeah, I think within then you have a killer idea. You can have a killer idea and it's completely novel. There's nothing like it out there in the world. And you've got something novel for a target market that is hungry for it. So you didn't start out with a killer idea. You started out with a killer passion. You said there's something, a problem that you are honored to try to solve. And something that in your heart of hearts, that if you are able to solve it, you will do well. Like there is a market out there. That's what kind of gets you through the dark days.
Yeah.
It's why I'm a fan of having surface area of the market, like the interviews I'd done with sales reps, or my next company, I'd done interviews with people I called super advocates, people who would advocate for companies that they really liked. And I would ask them, like, what would it take for you to triple the activity that you do? And they told me,
Interesting.
they said, this is what you need to do. And I'd go out there, and I remember talking to a VC that I really respected, really amazing guy. His name is David Scott. His name is David Scott, general partner at Matrix Partners.
Cool. Yep.
There's another David Scott in Toronto. It's a different David Scott.
Fair.
He was a 5-time super successful entrepreneur before he became a VC.
Okay.
And I came to him with my idea, and he said, Mark, please don't build this business. This business is not going to work. He's like, and I'll tell you why. It's like, I'll tell you why. He's like, people advocate for products or companies they like out of a sense of sort of noble obligation. This is kind of why they do that. And there's really not a lot that you can do to get people to do more of that. And I said to him, you know what? With all due respect, you're wrong. And I'll tell you why you're wrong. Interviewed 800 frickin' people. I know exactly how they think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they don't think like you because now you're a wealthy man because you've built all these companies.
Yeah,
You're a general
for
partner
sure.
at Matrix Partners.
Yeah.
So, you're great, but I'm going to build this business anyway.
Yeah.
And the fact that he told me why he thought my business was wrong, and I knew from the data, I had the data, and I knew that it is possible to get them to do more. And if you get them to feel like they're part of a team, if you give them constant feedback about how they're advocating is improving their life, and how it's improving the company they're advocating for, that I know that they do more of that activity, a lot more. And so I just built a company around that. I built software around those ideas that I learned about when I was interviewing people.
Yeah.
And so you don't need a killer product idea.
Cool.
But it is useful to have some insight into a problem that not a lot of other people have.
Yeah.
That's really useful to have.
Yeah.
And that's work that most entrepreneurs are not willing to do.
Yeah.
They're willing to dream all day about their wonderful product that they're going to polish.
Yep.
And they're going to be
Yeah.
great. And they
100%.
dream about that all day long. They don't really want to interview 800 people.
That's pretty impressive.
They don't want to tell anybody about it.
They don't want to.
but
They want
they're
to
going to bring
hide
out NDAs before they talk to anybody.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome, Mark. Thank you so much. This is really, really interesting. We're gonna probably have you on the show again. This is great. Thank you so much for being here, folks. Mark Organ, fantastic interview here on Startup Different. Folks, follow us on social. Check out our book on all online major retailers. And we will see you next week where we go deep on this interview with Mark. Thanks so much.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the episode. Nicely done. If you enjoyed this episode, like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so the almighty algorithm can help others find us. Want more from Startup Different? Check out our book, Startup Different, the myth-busting blueprint for your multi-million-dollar business. Follow us on social. We're big on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also check us out at startupdifferent.com. Special thanks for this episode to Graham and our friends at Toronto Podcasts. Visit them at torontopodcast.ca. See you next week.